You are listening to Talking Star Wars.
Hello, Star Wars fans.
I'm Alex,
And I'm Connor.
and this is season 2 of Talking Star Wars, our premiere episode. Thank you to all who listened to our interquel season about Avatar: The Last Airbender, another multimedia franchise. But after our brief interlude, we are now back into another full 50 plus episodes in season 2 of Talking Star Wars, all about Star Wars, starting today.
Yeah, and I'll be excited to get back to Avatar at some point to talk about at the time of this recording, new Netflix live action show, comparing it to the film that does not exist in Ba Sing Se, and getting around to the novels, which I am excited to delve into surrounding Avatar's Kyoshi and Yang Chen. And Roku, because I believe there's one coming out around that Avatar as well, right?
Indeed, there is.
Excellent.
But that will
But
be in
today,
the future, in the future cycle. Today, we are going to resume Star Wars. And
yes.
as we ended our last season with a character spotlight on Ahsoka, who had just been highlighted in the most recent completed visual media series, the Ahsoka show, we are going to kick off season 2 with another character spotlight on the antagonist of that show, Grand Admiral Thrawn, or as he would be known in the Chiss Ascendancy. And I'm going to butcher this, my Chiss listeners, Mitth'raw'nuruodo.
Yeah, you got Thrawn in there, so hopefully they will be apologetic towards the attempt. But yeah, I am a little enamored by Thrawn because he is one of the few elements that has survived from the Legends era of Star Wars and has uh, kind of crossed over into what the new canon is under Disney's rule.
So let's start with Thrawn by giving a sketch of his sort of Legends introduction, and then this we will be doing a character spotlight on the current canon version of Thrawn, but just so we understand where he's coming from, as Thrawn's creator, Timothy Zahn, has taken a great deal of the characterization he did back, in the 90s and early 2000s with the character and brought it into this new canon as well.
Mhm.
So in the old Legends canon, Grand Admiral Thrawn was introduced in the Heir to the Empire trilogy, where he was the titular heir to the Empire, being a high-ranking Imperial official leading the Imperial remnant and being one of the few competent and tactically savvy, in fact, tactically genius military officers, being a match for anyone the New Republic at the time could throw at him.
Mhm.
And also being invested in, there's Palpatine's clones, and he had strange Nogri assassins, but he always had another tactical play up his sleeve, written by, as I said, Timothy Zahn.
Right, and this was set up as a successor to Star Wars, a sequel series, because at this point, I think George Lucas knew in the late 80s, sort of early 90s, that he was going to create the Star Wars prequels, because in his, expanded universe empire, crossing video games, books, and the like, he told the creators, the writers under his, hire, that they could write about pretty much anything other than what happened before Star Wars, because that's what he was working on. He didn't really care about what happened after, because in his mind, the story was done with Luke redeeming his father. Uh, so, it's not like he was completely out of the room while all of this was happening. He had to approve certain things, but uh, Zahn's trilogy of books for, uh, I can't remember exactly what the trilogy is called, but starting with Heir to the Empire, we get Thrawn standing in as the successor to the Emperor. And I think that the reason why that he is so uh, just strong and interesting as a character is because he truly is written so well to be this crafty figure that could stand toe to toe with the Emperor if he wasn't so loyal.
And Thrawn is competent without being, unbelievably so. He is not a sneering evil. He's not sneeringly evil just for the sake of being evil, like a Sith would be. He is calculating. His decisions make sense. And so he gets some sort of, you respect him as an antagonist, even if you oppose his goals, which is one
Mhm.
reason I believe Thrawn has remained a compelling character both in the old canon and now into the new canon.
Yeah, if I had to sort of point at his character, it's not like he's Vader. If something goes wrong on a mission, Vader will get upset and choke out one of his admirals beneath him. If Tarkin, something goes wrong for him, he will stew and just simmer. If something goes wrong, Thrawn is happy. If something goes wrong, Thrawn knows that this is part of his education, where he can learn about the enemy. Therefore, they will surely, fall to his command in the next attack. He's just very intelligent, very calm. He doesn't have that sense of just sort of like fury and frustration that a Vader would have. So it makes him a unique villain amongst the cast of your usual black hats.
Yeah, so before we dig into a detailed sketch of his personality, let's establish who Grand Admiral Thrawn is in the new canon. So he was introduced fairly almost simultaneously. Well, his first introduction was as the antagonist of season 3 of Rebels, the show that follows Ezra Bridger, Kanan Jarrus, and the crew of the Ghost. And after the season 2 to season 3 time skip, Grand Admiral Thrawn is one of their primary antagonists.
Mm-hmm.
He is competent, brutal, cultured, and just has a great deal of respect for his antagonists, even while he still pursues rather reprehensible ends. Thrawn is a Chiss, so physically he is about as tall as a human, or a little bit taller, with vivid blue skin, glowing red eyes, very dark blue verging on black hair, and with a sort of soft-spoken mannerism. As a Grand Admiral, he is always depicted wearing the white uniform of the Grand Admiral's uniform and associated gold, red, and blue rank plate. And Thrawn himself is shown to, while doing most of his commanding from the bridge of a Star Destroyer, he is himself proficient in hand-to-hand combat. The Chiss are a people that lie in sort of the wild space areas outside the bounds of the Republic, or even outside the bounds of the Outer Rim. Thrawn is himself part of the Empire for his own reasons that we will get into.
Mm-hmm. So pointing out that he is this alien species within the Empire, there really are no other aliens within the Empire. Palpatine is a little bit of a speciesist. I don't know if you'd call them. I guess most of these aliens are humanoid. Like a Chiss would still be a humanoid, but they're still not the human class within Star Wars, which confounds me because where's the Earth in Star Wars? But that is besides the point. But he, this goes to show that he is crafty, intelligent, clever, and effective enough to be not just in the Empire, but one of the highest ranking members within the Empire, enough so that he can take command after Palpatine's fall.
Yeah, and Palpatine himself is not a speciesist. He views everyone as tools and lesser than him, but it is a very useful tool for a fascist emperor to have a nice other that he can point people towards. And so when a bunch of speciesists and racists attach themselves to his cause, he's like, yes, a useful tool to motivate the masses, which is why you see he himself is fine. If he has a competent person he can manipulate and use from another race, Palpatine does so without hesitation. Mas Amedda, Thrawn, the Grand Inquisitor, anyone else that he needs to manipulate and control. But he is more than happy to promote Tarkin and Wolf Yularen and others who have a less than cordial relationship with non-human races.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that's interesting about Thrawn is that much of his backstory fits, whether it be in Legends or in the new canon, because Zahn also wrote a series of books digging into Thrawn's actual backstory. Isn't that correct?
Correct. Yeah. If you're looking for Thrawn, he has appeared in the following works in the new canon. There's a trilogy of books that interweave with his story in the Rebels TV show. Thrawn, Thrawn Alliances, and Thrawn Treason. Those are the new Thrawn trilogy. That gives his backstory leading up to his appearance in season 3 of Rebels, and then shows what he's up to when he keeps getting called away and is unavailable while helping manage the Empire in seasons 3 and 4 of Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the only antagonist that the Ghost crew faces. And then Thrawn Treason literally leads up into his mission where he is then defeated by Ezra Bridger in the season 4 finale. of rebels, which then
Yes.
leads, of course, into his appearance in his most recent appearance, which is in the Ahsoka show, where we see after surviving for a decade on an alien planet, he is ready to come home, and apparently still loyal to the idea of the Empire. We will see. And then we have a trilogy of books going into his backstory before he ever entered the Republic, which is the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy, Chaos Rising, Greater Good, Lesser Evil, which is set entirely within the Chiss Ascendancy in wild space, where the primary antagonists are the Grisk, a terrifying alien race known for subjugating other races through complicated decades-long plans of infiltration and psychological warfare.
Mhm. So this leads more into sort of Thrawn's goals, just maybe where his true allegiances lay. Because yes, he is a high-ranking member of the Empire, but it feels like he's using the Empire as a tool to serve his own desires.
Palpatine is always suspicious of this, that Thrawn's true loyalty is to the Chiss Ascendancy rather than to the Empire. And Thrawn himself has rather conflicted loyalties. He is loyal to the Chiss Ascendancy, but he is also loyal to the Empire. Thrawn is not someone who can throw away an oath easily, and he has sworn himself to both countries, or both nations, rather. And so
He's an honorable villain.
Yeah, he's very pragmatic, but he also knows that if he breaks his word in one way, no one would ever trust him again. So he's this very pragmatic streak of once he's given his word, he will honor it, not necessarily because he has an intrinsic sense of honor, but because he realizes that being able to be seen as a reliable and rational actor is better for him in the long run than the short run, which is a fascinating take on his character. Everything just is a calculation in his mind. Not to say that he is a good person. It comes to mind, Connor, season 4 of Rebels, where the rebels are willing to abjectly surrender to him because he has them outmaneuvered, and he, feeling vindictive and also having the upper hand and having nothing else he needs from the rebels, he needs no prisoners. He has accepted their surrender before, and they have reneged on that. Simply continues the attack, killing hundreds because he needs to really grind in their defeat to him to show off to his own troops, because he sees it as the best tactical option is to simply destroy their ability to make further war on him, regardless of whether it's a good thing to attack a surrendering opponent.
His patience at that point has run out, and he needs to make a statement. That also brings to mind his passion and fascination for art, but also his emotional detachment for acquiring, stealing, and appropriating that art. Something that's true of Thrawn in Legends and in current canon is that he is a firm believer that if you learn about someone's art, you learn about their culture, then you learn the way they think, the way they strategize, and the way they fight. So he relishes in learning this, but he also, will take precious family heirlooms and keep them in his collection because, he knows the true value of what those valuable heirlooms are in his mind, at least. And he is as deserving of their possession as the actual cultures that they belong to.
Yeah, Thrawn uses the analysis of the art and works of his enemies as a way to understand their culture and to get the tactical upper hand. And he himself would say that this elevates him in esteem above someone who is not willing to use those tools or form those analyses based on art and culture. But we get to the thing where at one point, there is a treasonous Imperial Admiral who is going to turn on Thrawn, and Thrawn needs to figure out his battle tactics. He's going to be grossly outnumbered. And so he finds an opera that the other admiral conducted back in his college days, and he uses the movements of that opera series to determine the exact moves he will make in his Star Destroyer, and thus lure him into a false sense of security. In fact, gives the exact orders of the exact sequence of events that he believes that his antagonist will make to his second in command, while he himself then maneuvers in another way. He is constantly seeking out artwork of the Grisk in the prequel trilogy about him so that he can understand more about their culture. And he is constantly analyzing individuals based on their speech patterns, their behaviors, their art. So he's got this cultured edge to him, but it does not make him any more. It makes him a interesting villain, but it is always within the context of how he can then defeat his enemies. Thrawn will almost lure the reader and the viewer into this false sense of, this is a good man. Thrawn would even disagree with that. He sees things and objects and people as tools. And he himself realizes that he has this sociopathic streak to him, and he does not particularly enjoy it about himself, but he is unable to be other than he is. And so he continues down that path, even among the Chiss. So the Chiss have sort of a chilling reputation of being rather warlike and effective, but Thrawn is cold and murderous is the wrong word, but pragmatic even by the standards of the Chiss, where even other people, among his own people, he is later exiled and does not have. He has many subordinates that are very loyal to him, and many who think that he will one day overreach and destroy all that the Chiss hold dear on a mad gamble.
So right now he's poised in this position where we don't know where his loyalties are going to ultimately lead, because Palpatine was the Empire, and Thrawn was loyal to Palpatine. Palpatine is gone. Is Thrawn still loyal to the Empire? Is Thrawn the new Empire? Is he going to return to the Chiss? Based on where they've taken his character in canon, where can you see that taking off when we get into the second season of Ahsoka, perhaps, or wherever Thrawn's going to show up next? Because they've been building him up as this primary antagonist of the streaming Star Wars universe from really the Mandalorian moving forward, whether it be with Moff Gideon being this somewhat subservient, somewhat rebellious agent of Thrawn, but we still hear whispers of him starting with season 2. That's who we know that Ahsoka is searching for.
So Thrawn never appears to lose his loyalty to the Chiss Ascendancy, and he knows that the Grisk are playing the long game to attempt to conquer the Chiss, and that was his entire aim when scouting out the Empire. Was he wanted to seek out allies that could be either manipulated or gone into alliance with the Chiss. The Chiss see themselves as obviously the most perfect society and the most powerful race. Thrawn is surprised when he enters into the army of the navy of the Empire and realizes that if the Empire wanted, they could crush the Chiss. It would not be much of a contest. Their technology is more advanced in many ways than the Chiss, and their hyperdrives are more advanced. So he then also, both before and after being in the Empire, funnels some of that technology to be studied in the Chiss Ascendancy so that they can utilize that technology themselves. But he also, by being on the inside of this most powerful force, he wants to both prevent the Empire from just attacking and incorporating the Chiss, and he does so by freely giving information about the Outer Rim to Palpatine in exchange for leaving the Chiss alone, which is one reason why Palpatine is able to establish his hideaway in Exegol, his eventual rise of the First Order. Thrawn gives him a great deal of information about wild space beyond the Outer Rim so that he can navigate to those areas. But also, I believe Thrawn wishes to utilize the powers of the Empire against the enemies of the Chiss, whether he needs to manipulate and maneuver them into doing that, or whether he believes that the Grisk would naturally try to subvert and conquer the Empire itself and later the Republic. Thrawn is always thinking through how to destroy his enemies in the most efficient way possible. After he is defeated by Ezra Bridger and Kanan Jarrus and the Bendu, we can tell that there's a significant shift in Thrawn's tactical thinking, in that before that happens, he is relatively dismissive of the Force. Even his own people use Force-sensitive children as hyperspace navigators. They're called Skywalkers in the Chiss language, showing the universality of that sort of title and name across the Star Wars setting. There's even an amusing anecdote where he thinks that is Anakin Skywalker's job when the two encounter each other on a mission during the Clone Wars before Anakin becomes Vader.
Don't you have your own Skywalkers here?
Yeah, but so he enjoys the freedom that the Imperials navigate hyperspace lanes give them, but that doesn't really work in wild space where there's always these objects in motion and there are no established hyperspace lanes. You need someone who's force sensitive to navigate you through the wild space hyperspace lanes, or otherwise you have to crawl across hyperspace. It takes weeks to travel across a cluster. But all that said, his shift in his tactical thinking, he then, even though he utilizes the force when he is with the Chiss and later on working at the Empire in sort of this pragmatic, tactical way, he even presses the boundaries of what the Chiss would consider proper by relying on precognition and force bonds. The Chiss largely only recognize force sensitivity and the ability to navigate hyperspace. But then he still views it in that context. When he sees Vader in action, and then when he is defeated by a Jedi, he starts to see them as sort of rogue variables. We see in the Ahsoka show he is very uncomfortable being around Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati to a significant degree, and he has refused to continue to waste forces on antagonizing Ezra Bridger further, simply keeping tabs on his location. He is fully aware that the Jedi and other force-sensitive individuals rely on powers he himself does not have access to. And so one of his first things he does on Peridea is to ally himself with his own force-sensitive faction, the Night Mothers, so that he can have a counterbalance to the Jedi themselves. And even then, his primary tactic when faced with Ahsoka Tano, Sabine Wren, and Ezra Bridger attacking or potentially interfering with his plans is to manipulate Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati into leaving as well. And all those force sensitive people can go all the way over this way and not interfere with his plans. And he succeeds. He doesn't take a serious attempt to kill them. Well, he does, but he knows that he calculates that it will likely fail given the abilities they have access to.
But by taking them into account, he just wants to distract them so that he can get away with as many remaining troops, because it would probably take an armada in order to stop Anakin Skywalker's apprentice, which is when you can tell that there's a little bit of terror there, where he remembers Anakin, recognizes his strength, and if Ahsoka is indeed his former Padawan, he is in for some real trouble.
Yeah, he immediately upgrades Ahsoka Tano's threat level. Who is her master? Anakin Skywalker. Oh. Give me all information we have on her immediately. But yeah, access information is always what Thrawn wants. And even he is able to relatively easily predict many of Sabine's actions because for reviewers of Rebels, he collected her art. She is an artist, as we have seen, and he even comments on the art on her armor and he never fails to predict her actions. Ezra and Ahsoka are more unknown to him, and they are, of course, closer to true Jedi detachment than Sabine is. But yeah, I appreciate that Thrawn recognizes how the Force and Force-sensitive individuals are so incredibly powerful after being relatively dismissive of them after they were so easily killed during Order 66. So then he's like, Palpatine actually did have to do something really substantial to eliminate this many powerful people. So Thrawn decides he needs to send as many people as far away, all these Jedi as far away from his carefully laid plans as possible.
Mm-hmm. This makes me, harken back to Thrawn's plan in Heir to the Empire, where it's somewhat similar. I mean, this is what they're doing with Thrawn now in Ahsoka is starting to have some parallels with his Legends introduction in Heir to the Empire, where he's working with a dark side Force user. Some of the only differences are that he's facing up against Ahsoka rather than Luke and the core heroes from that era. It'll be interesting to see if they pit a Luke Skywalker up against Thrawn. It would be conceptually hard to imagine. Logistically could be a bit tough just because the cost of putting a CGI face on Luke stand-in might be cost prohibitive. Thrawn is returned to the main galaxy, allying himself with the Night Sisters, who are so far away from the Jedi that he is kind of in that nebulous, unknown position as far as next steps are.
Agreed. So I'm not sure quite what Thrawn's plans are, or whether he wants his own independent power base, and after being trapped for a decade, he now wants to insulate himself from that happening again. But
Mhm.
Thrawn always has an objective. He's never going to become a leader for the sake of being a leader. We see that he was never one for really being a cult of personality, but then when he's trapped in a faraway place with no reinforcements, he deliberately goes out and he establishes his own cult of personality. So his troops chant his name.
Mhm.
He gives them unique armor to differentiate themselves with all the red wrappings and the gold filigree filling in on their armor, which is an ancient Japanese artistic technique, by the way.
Mhm. Yeah, working to
Wearing
try
of
to
something.
repair some imperfections in broken pottery, so they repair it with gold in order to sort of highlight and celebrate those imperfections. Here, it seems like a repair because these stormtroopers are quite possibly undead through Night Sister magic.
Well, I think that only happens towards the end of the Ahsoka show. But yeah, his Kintsugi troopers are definitely one of the most visually striking stormtroopers we've seen, and also call back to sort of that used future look that Star Wars is known for. This is a Star Destroyer and a contingent that has been put through the ringer for a decade, and
Mhm.
so Thrawn has made the most of it, but has not emerged unscathed. But he succeeds in his plan. He does not succeed entirely. He doesn't manage to kill Ezra or Sabine or Ahsoka, but he completely loads in all of his likely slumbering Night Sister sarcophagi for his potential force-sensitive army, and reaches Dathomir, returning to his home galaxy. So Thrawn is successful. He adequately takes the measure of both his allies and his enemies and positions them all so he can get what he needs. And we see this trend carry out time and again. His biggest weakness, as we see in the Rebel show, is assuming everyone is as competent and committed as he is. So he once he has the Ghost Crew cornered, and then Admiral Constantine moves his ship out of position, and that allows them to escape. So by Thrawn having castigated Constantine, then puts him out of his mind. It doesn't take into account the human personal element to Constantine needing to then prove himself. And so Constantine moves out of position, and Thrawn's enemies escape and are able to defeat him. He underestimates Jedi, and so Ezra is able to summon the Purgle and remove him from play. He again underestimates the Bendu, and his fleet takes significant casualties and mass the escape of Hera and the remnants of Phoenix Squadron when they escape. So Thrawn is not infallible. We do see him make mistakes, but we also see him adapt and learn from them, which is what makes him such an interesting antagonist. If you had to add a final sort of assessment of Thrawn's character, what would you say? Any other traits that you would call out, or anything you'd want to look at, looking forward or back for Thrawn?
I I would say to sort of sum up my thoughts on Thrawn, just to bring up again his relationship to Palpatine as villain. Palpatine also very calculated. He has the long-term plans. He is playing all the different sides of the table at the same time. He knows his enemy, but Palpatine relishes in evil, in uh, I don't know, causing things to
Yeah.
crumble and fall for his rise to occur. Thrawn very much seems like uh, he does get the same sort of joy in doing what he does, but it's very much above board. Like, yes, he will commit a war crime, but he's not doing it just for the sheer joy that Palpatine would. It would be out of the necessity of what sort of consequences that act would have and what sort of impact it would have on the enemy. Not so much that, you know, he will gleefully send his servant in to murder the children. Thrawn doesn't seem like, I wouldn't put it past him as a member of the Empire, but not to show my political agenda here on our Star Wars podcast, but he just seems to be a more honorable villain, and that is, in my eyes, what makes him so interesting in a series where it's, you know, tropes are used and celebrated in a way. So to see someone who is again above board, trying to win the game of war in the most respectful way possible is quite interesting and makes for just a memorable, unique villain.
Yeah, and Thrawn's pragmatism is appreciated in that if he does something brutal, you see the reason for doing it. It's not just to cause pain or to cause. He's not a Sith. He takes no intrinsic joy in brutality. And we see when he argues with Darth Vader during the war with the rebels, he is always opposing Darth Vader's brutality on practical grounds. It's like, this is going to damage the morale of my men or of my forces. This is going to potentially make someone want to leak our plans. This is going to cause people to be less willing to tactically innovate or bring me important information in the future. So he always has a pragmatic view. He does not really have a moral view. We do see he does have some morals, especially I think in his prequel trilogy among the Chiss when he's a younger officer. But as he gets older and goes through the Empire, I mean, he changes. He is not the same person. So I think some of his ideals get ground down. I think he himself would say that he is sort of immune to the Cold War machine that Palpatine has made. But you compare the Captain Thrawn, who risked his ship's life to save some civilians during greater good and lesser evil, to the Thrawn that forced into a corner, been under Palpatine's jurisdiction for 10 years, with his own chimera and his Star Destroyer above a planet that has time and again broken free from his hold and just ordering the bombardment of the civilian population with turbo lasers. That's a different Thrawn. You can still see every step of the decision that led him there and understand the mindset that he has. But Thrawn, despite having a sort of all above it all mindset, he is not immune to the forces that are affecting him. He tries to maintain this look of being above it all, but picture, his moment of instant, if not fear, but frozen calculation when he learns that Ahsoka Tano was Anakin Skywalker's Padawan. When he turns to his underlings and says, "Oh no, we are not going to put more resources towards trying to kill Jedi. I've dealt it of them enough before." He's adaptable, but not perfect, and that is why I think makes him a villain. He can be defeated, he can be outmaneuvered, but never easily. He is not someone who's going to forget to post guards outside the cell. He's going to do what Grand Moff Tarkin did. He's like, "No, I put a tracking device on the Millennium Falcon." The Thrawn might have also then put a bomb, so that after it had reached the destination, he could then blow it up. Because he's like, they've already escaped my fortress once. I don't need them taking anything they know about the Death Star back as soon as I know their location.
And he's polite about it. He will never insult you or make a dad joke like Vader will. And he will be a gentleman about your defeat.
Yeah, Thrawn is gentleman villain is a good way, almost in that old school noble officer way. He's affable and likable, and he never makes his attacks personal, and he shows a great deal of respect, for example, for Hera Syndulla, for Sabine Wren, a little bit less so for Ezra Bridger, but then again, they do not have the same philosophy. He respects Bridger's power, if not his way in which he looks at life, and he obviously does not respect many of his underlings whose primary concern is politics and self-aggrandizement over success of the mission. And the last thing I want to add about Thrawn is he is both visually striking, and he knows it with his blue skin and glowing red eyes, to the point he's willing to use that as an intimidation factor when he needs to. Mm-hmm. And also that the chosen leitmotif for him in the Star Wars with this deep, chilling organ music that always announces his arrival. Connor and I like to make the joke of, you'll be watching an episode of Rebels and they'll go be fine, but then one of the characters say, "Wait, I hear organ music. We need to get out of here." And it's Thrawn's Star Destroyer sliding into orbit, and then a real antagonist with real competence has arrived. Mm-hmm. So
he's just pumping into the atmosphere above the planet, that soundtrack.
Lieutenant, please turn on my preferred beats. Deploy the soundtrack to demoralize the enemy.
Yes, you layer and get to it.
Yeah. So overall, I find of the antagonists that are currently present in the Disney canon of Star Wars, Gideon was great for what he was, being the sort of brutish warlord, but with also competent about it. We have Thrawn with his goals, and sort of a cut above what we see come out of the First Order, where their sort of zealotry has blinded them and they make bad decisions. where Snoke is able to be killed by Kylo Ren. Kylo is murdering his subordinate officers. Hux is being reduced to a laughing stock. Thrawn is a cut above them, and sort of matching the whole in the pantheon with Tarkin and with Count Dooku and Sidious himself, villains who are effective at what they do. And I could
Yes.
totally see if it became relevant, if there was a greater threat to Thrawn or Thrawn's plans, he would be just fine allying with his former enemies if he needed to. So I can see if there is some greater threat, if he decided that the coming First Order is a bigger threat to the Chiss than the New Republic, I could see him going like, okay, let's make a deal.
But only as long as it served him.
Oh, yes.
He would, of course, honor the deal, but there'd be some almost genie-like implications for the deal that his allies would make in the end.
Thrawn is someone who always has fine print in all of his plans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But overall, I would say he is intelligent, almost captivating in his analyses of what's going on. This artistic streak he has, with which is both interesting, but then also just a hint of the Nazi art thief stealing art from conquered peoples. So it all combines into making a character that it almost tricks you into like, oh, I really like this guy. And then he starts bombarding planets and opposing your heroes, where you like to see him as the antagonist because you know you're going to get a good story. But you never, you can see the charisma that he has, but you never quite turn around and being like, oh, I want to root for this guy. It's like, I want to see him be effective. But then he almost lures you into being like, you realize he's still a bad guy, right? The lack of a moral compass is still going to come back and make him someone that will do terrible things to the people you like.
Mm-hmm. So yes, we have delved into the red eyes of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Quite an interesting character who's had some history in the Star Wars franchise and will continue to do so in this further arc in film and television. But join us next time, Star Wars fans, as we continue to talk Star Wars, digging into more corners of the galaxy.
All right. Thank you for listening to our analysis of Grand Admiral Thrawn, and we'll talk to you next week.
We'll see you sometime soon in a galaxy right here.